Today's podcast, we're covering contact prep, warm-up drills, and injury prevention with ex-pro player, S&C coach, and now qualified osteopath, Jonathan Phipps. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so obviously at the moment there's a lot of stuff around head injuries, neck injuries, and stuff like that, and how rugby is kind of changing a bit, especially since from when we were playing. And I think it's really important that we prehab rather than rehab. So like proactive rather than reactive. So getting some of that strength stuff in there. I see patients all day, every day now who are struggling with stress, anxiety, and a lot of it's exhibited in neck pain stuff. So I think having gone on, finished rugby, started studying to be an osteopath, doing loads and loads of anatomy stuff has made me realise how important the structures in there are. You can't turn your neck without every single part of your spine moving. That's the reality. So if you haven't got a strong back, lower back, upper back, you're not going to have a strong neck really, and it creates that base. So having then you asking me to have a conversation about it has made me rethink about what my rugby career. And actually, everyone always comments on my neck and shit, like your neck's massive. I'm like, well, it's just part of rugby, isn't it? Isn't that normal? And then you get into normal life, and then you treating these patients who've got big ranges of things. They all walk in and go, God, your neck's massive. And I think that's that whole strength thing. So we did loads of stuff when I was in New Zealand playing Manawatu, and then when Bruce did the work with us in Samboy, we translated a lot of that stuff. So I've got a couple of videos from both of those eras. Some more impressive than others, but it's all about like core strength, which is definitely not just that concept of your abs in that area. It is shoulders, neck, all the way down to your hips. If you haven't got a lot of strength through there, from a scrummaging perspective, certainly, probably from a global rugby perspective, you can't be as effective. And so getting that tension, understanding that actually, you can do loads of work to help it is really important. It's a little bit like, it's a little bit, I'm going to say, sort of, it's not misunderstood. It's just not done as much because it's not that interesting. I'm going to show you some videos, and some of them are pretty dull. Some of them we used to use as warm ups. So you're doing loads of strength stuff before you get into your scrummaging and stuff, and it works really well. So this was a.
Get your hand right up behind his head.
Bruce talking there. I'll just mute him. So this is a strengthening, a strength training exercise. So that's Afa on the right. Would you believe? In his younger days, a bit more hair. You'd be working your arms into there, in through the arms to try and get in behind the head. And there's another angle which it should go to in a minute. So it shows you where the hand position is. So you're pulling down on the head, and you're working together in some respects. You're trying to get them to work hard as well as work hard yourself. That's quite a good one from a warm-up perspective. We used to use quite a bit.
Yeah, and just so for people watching, you're actually pulling quite strongly. And do you want that coming straight through, or is it slightly trying to pull the head?
It's coming straight down, really, because at the moment this is still a warm-up thing. They look like they're grimacing and having fun there, don't they? You're trying to get the head to work, but you're also integrating the shoulders into that as well, because you're creating that compression from both arms coming through. It makes quite a big difference. And it was more about the scrum stuff. So it was more about getting that isometric strength, which again, this next one is very, very similar. Most of these are what's termed isometric. So from a muscular contraction perspective,
right down.
You're holding those positions rather than moving the neck. Again, there you can see that press ups on top of people's necks. What we used to do there, and that I think it's Mafu Fear closest to us. Again, pretty well decorated prop. So you shorten your neck first. You're then getting into that position before they put the pressure on, and then it's about sustained control. So the people underneath have to work really hard, keep that position. So again, when you're doing the press ups, you're going to be moving a little bit from side to side. It's not, it looks like it's straight down, but it's a little bit more than that. We used to use quite a lot of that.
Have you tried that one where they've actually got their knees off the ground and they actually have to?
No. Have you had a go at that then?
No, I'm quite curious to see whether.
Yeah.
I think you might actually have to be quite strong to hold that position.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we did find, I've got some videos in a minute where we did it in Spain with some not as strong people, and it is tough. So you have to be really competent at doing press ups. Most of the guys doing these videos were academy full-time guys, so they did a lot of stuff. So that's that one. And then we also, like I was saying, some generic stuff. So this one, again, this is a good warm-up one. This is basically a plank, but upright. And the idea of this is actually, although there you go, see, he's not alternating. He is making it a little bit random. So you have to work quite hard in that position, which again translates into scrummaging, translates into most weightlifting, really. And that sort of one there. And then there's another one where you actually do the same thing, but you do it on the biceps.
Bicep drill.
So you are holding out there. So again, your fulcrum's a bit bigger, which forces you to work even harder. Again, which is a really good one. Again, that's a baby-faced Mafu there. But it's, again, those things for warm-ups are brilliant. It don't have to be a forward, it can be a back as well. Really, really good to help develop that strength. That will translate into all running patterns, all sidestepping, any strength work, all those sorts of things. And then I think we then move on to the ones, these ones, Craig Lyons' video. Didn't ask him for his permission. So again, this is a similar one to the one we saw previously, but this is a tricep dip. And again, you're trying to hold that position. You can see chap on the floor, Carlos, next to us in the white. He's working quite hard to keep his head up there, and that's definitely an up and down pressure. But you can adjust them. I think this next one again is a press up. As you can see, he's not the smallest lad in the world. So you do. There is an element of sort of being a little bit careful. We toyed around with hand position. You could change it if you put the hand further on the back of the neck. It changes it. But you're definitely in an active position. You have to get active before the person touches your head, because otherwise your neck is then being moved. Create that tension first to then allow that stable base. And then another one I just threw in there just because I'm a scrum nose, basically. We used to do these all the time. Oh yeah, that's me. Yeah. We used to do these all the time, and it's really challenging. You see, I was trying to find a load of other videos. I couldn't find them, but you do all sorts of things. So you're on someone's back, and then they got to get up off the ground, and they're trying to use their core, their body weight to try and get up, which is really difficult. It's really, really not easy.
Are you actually trying to stop them from getting up there, or is it just
no? It's just resistance,
just putting that weight on, and
it's just let you literally. I mean, you have to work as well as the person on top. You have to squeeze and get into there, but it's about trying to stand up, trying to develop that whole body strength to get in there, and then you're trying to falling down gracefully. No, there's all sorts of variations of that. We used to do some things like I'd say like how you get a hula hoop around your body. Not hula hoop. That's a crisp. You know what I mean? Hula.
They got to basically go.
Go
around you.
Body. So what we used to do is, like, you would have someone on your back. They'd be on you just like that, and then they have to climb around your body, stay off the ground, which was horrific if you got the wrong person, but really, really good. And then we did another one where you had to go under them. So you'd be on one side, you'd have to crawl under them, as in go under through their legs, but you have to stay off the ground again. So it's about working together. We did loads of stuff where you're in that scrum position and crawling. So what you said earlier about the knees off the ground, we used to do that last video I showed you where they're on the back. You would have someone on your back like that, and then you'd have to crawl to the 22 in a scrum position, keeping your knees off the ground, and maintain that straight flat back. Because again, your neck strength, certainly for our focus was scrum stuff. If anyone can read the Spanish, there was Club de Primera Líneas, so it's first line, we used to have a little club for ourselves, just the front row, because specialist position and all that. And you'd have to hold that position, and it was all based around like working on your neck strength, working on your core stability. A lot of the scrummaging drills we would do, we would extend them. We would have 3-on-3s, and you'd hold that position for as long as you could, basically. And then it even got to the point where Bruiser or any of the coaches would actually walk on top of you and get on top of you, so that you're getting that pressure, different loads, different angles. Then we used to do some stuff with, it was 1v1, but then you had 2 in behind. So technically it was 3v3. But as anyone who's ever played in the front row, you're never directly face on face. You're always offset. So actually, as that guy at the front, you've got to work really hard to get that weight through your right shoulder, and it's always right shoulder, really. So again, that plays into that neck strength, that shoulder strength, that compression, that ability. So again, we used to spend quite a lot of time in those positions, holding them, and then our tactic, if you're ever lucky enough to play against us, was to hold that scrum position until you couldn't hold it, and then we'd go. And that was our tactic quite a lot of the times.
Yeah, you see that that's one of the concepts I think is most important for coaching front rowers, is that ability to stay, basically maintain that pressure, because you've got the whole forward pack coming through that front three. And if you can, like I remember doing drills where it'd be like 2v1, and the 2 are just there basically to put you under as much stress, and you'd have to hold it for 10 seconds. You normally come up a bit dizzy, but it was a really good way, because most of the time when a prop does come out or pop up, it's just because he wants to get out of that pressure.
Yeah, he's got tired. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we used to do that. And then when I moved back to England, we had, I forget the name of the guy now, he's an ex Ireland prop. I think he played at Harlequins. I think it's the Scrum Doctor, I think is his brand. He came and coached at the National League club I was at, and brought his Scrum machine, and it measured your pressure per poundage, and we worked on the same principle. You'd be in that position, and you'd be maintaining that pressure for as long as you could, and it would be like a 30-second sort of, because scrums never last 30 seconds. So if you can last 30 seconds, actually, you're going to be doing better than most. And his thing was all about sustained pressure. So, it's about that isometric force. So so as well as an osteopath, I'm a PT as well. And I've got a couple of young lads who are like prospective rugby players, and, a couple of academy guys and things like that. So I do a lot of pausing stuff with them, get them into a position, holding down, and like box squat type stuff, pausing at the bottom, things like that. I've got a strap which I hook around my squat rack, and I get them into a scrum position, and it's slightly elastic, so they've got to fight against it, but they've got to hold that position. And I think that's pretty key if you can hold that. And it is a little bit.
Is that them holding the position basically like a bind, and they're just hanging on that?
No, they've got. So the strap, so I do it in 2 different ways, depending on loose head and tight, but I try and vary it a little bit. The strap comes across their chest there, through there, sometimes goes down through their legs and over the back, and they're leaning against this big strap, and it's attached to the squat rack.
Okay, so they come in.
So I'm challenging them to get their feet back far enough so that they can lean into it, and then I just basically, I'm a bit of a bugger, so for those 30 seconds, I then go around and push their head, push their shoulders, get them moving, make them hold that position. And it's quite telling sometimes, people are, it's that discomfort, it's uncomfortable position to be in. And sometimes scrummaging is pretty bloody painful. So if you can get used to it a little bit, that muscle ache, you can get over that, then you can do anything really.
So with the development of players, how much do you think a coach should be pushing that, and how much should a player, like let's start with sort of under 16, under 18s, should coaches be really pushing this onto their players to focus on neck and back strength, or is it more a role of the player to take this responsibility on?
Oh God, how long you got? No, it's an interesting question. Having done sort of so it's a little bit of a healthcare professional stroke sportsman coach type sort of ideas I have. My personal opinion is all kids should be doing weightlifting. They should be training like that. We look at like some of these other communist countries who get their children doing weightlifting, and yeah, sure, some of the practices are pretty archaic, but actually having that base of strength is so important. There is no research that I know of that says categorically that children shouldn't do weight training. When I say weight training, I'm not suggesting you get your 3 or 4 year olds go and deadlift 100 kilos, but if they got those patterns right, if they learned to do cleans, snatches, if they learned to lift weights correctly, and they started off with your wooden discs. I was listening to a podcast the other day. A guy called Matt Fraser won the CrossFit Games a number of times. His background, I don't know if you know what CrossFit is. His background is in weightlifting, and he lifted wooden discs for 8 months before he was ever allowed to touch weights. Like you can do stuff like that. You can get them the strength in there. There's more force going through knees, hips, and ankles in a rugby game or in a football game and in a tackle than there is in a weightlifting gym. If you lift the weights correctly, there's very little chance of getting injured, really. And the theory was around what's called your epiphyseal plate on the ends of the bones. And if you damage that, then you stunt growth. And I think it's all theoretical. There's no actual evidential research. So if we could get children doing more weights, when it comes to doing the sports, they would be stronger. We would then be stronger. And actually, we wouldn't be having these problems. Some of it is early retirement due to injuries. We'd be more conditioned. They're talking about getting rid of contact over here in schools because of that stuff. And I think that's because of concussions. And I think part of that is you get a disparity between the children who do loads of sport and the kids who don't. And then when they come together, there's going to be mismatches. I think I haven't really answered your question yet, am I? I think it's a combination. The coach needs to read how receptive they are. I would be pushing kids a little bit because you want to get the best out of them. And I think sometimes part of that strength stuff is, being worried about being able to perform, being able to lift those weights, being able to do that stuff. So if the coach does encourage them, then it should help. On the flip side of that is, how much pressure is too much. You want to make sure that they're resilient and injury, they can avoid as many injuries as possible. And that should be a bit of a given, but it is a bit of a fine line.
So what have you learned? Because you've obviously come through as a professional player with an S&C background. Now, recently you just finished your osteo degree. What do you think some of the most important facets that coaches need to be focusing on for front row players?
So it's a hugely technical position. So there are it's so difficult because I think it needs to be graduated. So at certain ages, it's like as you become, as you age in this country, certainly they add on things. So the rules slightly change and evolve. So you get more and more. So the idea is the exposure becomes greater. One of the lads I'm coaching at the moment, they do, I think it's under 14s here, they do uncontested lineouts, but they do contested scrums, but it's with 6, not 8. So next year, I think they then go up to 8, and so it builds layer upon layer. I think you have to keep revisiting the technical elements of it. You have to keep, drilling and going over foot position, back position, strength stuff. That's why I quite like some of those videos we talked about, because they're actually, if you keep going over those, it keeps building your strength. And as you grow, your body has to get stronger because you're doing the same things with a different weight. So I think certainly from a front row perspective, that technical stuff's super important because it then adds into safety, and you need to understand what to do when things go wrong. So I remember we used to talk about like going flat. If the scrum collapses, you go flat so that your neck doesn't get into a twisted position. That can go wrong sometimes as well. So it's really important to recognize some of that stuff. making sure that you're not continuing to push through when someone slips and stuff like that, and protecting your teammates just to make sure that they're safe. I think that stuff's really important. So the strength stuff and the technique stuff's really good. Um, it is also, I think, it's really difficult, but knowing the limit of your knowledge. So certainly, from the way that I'm governed as an osteopath, you kind of nothing is off limits as far as treatment goes, but you need to know what you know, and you need to kind of know what you don't know. So from a coaching perspective, from a rugby perspective, if you're out of your depth a little bit, I think reaching out to people and trying to get help is really important. Um, it's so difficult. It's certainly over here in England, you've got so many clubs, and everyone seems a little bit worried about what they don't know, you know, and there's not as much collaboration as I think there should be. Um, which would be good if they could sort of do a bit more of that.
And so, what advice would you give a player that they should be focusing on to, let's go sort of around under 18s. What advice would you give those players on where they can maybe find material, how they can get better, and what the important aspects are of training to make sure basically they stay injury free and can be dominant in the scrum?
So from an overall sort of an 18-year-old, the average 18-year-old, you're on the cusp of playing senior rugby. I would hope that they're doing some sort of strength training. Um, again, schools certainly in this country, they're they're under pressure, and I think there was something that the other day, the average under 16 girl does less than half an hour heart rate raising activity a week, which is pretty worrying. I mean, it's quite good for me as a healthcare professional because I'll be forever having patients. But you know, getting active is super important. Then you know, the stuff in the gym, it doesn't necessarily translate on the field. We've all got mates who are tiny little people who are strong as no one's like, how the hell are they so strong? The way we get stronger is sort of all about your nervous system as well as the muscle size. So the more stimulation, the stronger you are, the bigger the muscle fibers. It's a bit simplistic this, but the stronger you are, and it's those two mechanisms. So getting in the gym to help make yourself resilient is really good. But equally, you can be gym strong and you can be rubbish on the field. So there's definitely a balance to be had there. Scrummaging is all about technique, attitude, as well as all strength stuff as well. So there is a whole sort of, I was going to say holistic. No, that's osteopathy. It's not rugby. No, there's that wholeness around it. If you can work on all of those facets, it makes a big difference. If you're 18, from a front row perspective, you're a bit of a minnow, relatively speaking. Good front rowers, kind of mature late 20s. Rarely is it early 20s, late 20s, even 30s. So learning a craft, getting that experience, you're always going to come up against better people, and I think it's really important to learn from them. The worst experiences I've had is being a young player coming up against someone who's a bit older, and you think, yeah, I'm strong and I can get into this, and then they absolutely destroy you, and you're thinking, how the hell did that happen? He's an old bastard. I should have done that. But it's about that guile. I remember we played a few games in France, and like, wow, that was a scrummaging masterclass. I remember a French coach said, if you go into a scrum doing the same thing over and over again, you're dull and you will get destroyed. So they always said, always do something different. Never allow your opponent to know what you're going to do. And I've recently started doing jiu-jitsu, and that's exactly the same thing. If you do the same thing over and over again, they can read you and they can destroy you. So you've got to mix things up a little bit. And I think scrummaging's pretty similar. Mix things up, make sure you're never doing the same angles, or don't let the referee know that. And try different things, because you might find actually some sort of little techniques work better than others, certainly against different opposition. So that sort of getting your mileage under your belt is super important, because you'll then start to recognize those situations. It's good fun though, playing the front row. It's the only place on the field where, certainly being a hooker, you were directly against your opposite number, like actually physically against them.
And so for the balance, how much time do you think we could actually spend training scrum, especially trying to get that baseline of being able to maintain that pressure. What's a safe level of time spent per week we
Oh,
can do training scrum?
wow. That is put my neck on the line here. So there's a guy I used to play rugby with called Tom Tombleson, who was the England strength and conditioning coach up until quite recently, actually. Worked under Eddie Jones. He'd been there for quite a while, a couple of coaches. And I was listening to something he looked at the other day. His master's, I think, was in squat strength in the rugby team. And I think it was specifically front row. So what they did, which I thought was really interesting, is if you've got like, because I think when they have their camps, they do like 2 or 3 sessions a week of scrummaging. Those guys who do the scrummaging, the front row particularly, would not actually squat during the week because it's identical. That same position, hips 90 degrees, knees 120 degrees. You know, that sort of or thereabouts within those ranges. They would say actually, if they then went on to squat, they would be overloading themselves, which I always thought was quite interesting. I never thought about it like that. For me, I kind of separated rugby and the weight training, scrummaging stuff. When actually, if you are in an environment where it's one and the same, so you've got to manage that load. So like when we did the stuff with Spain, you used to do those scores in the morning. I don't know if you remember that. Like you do the, you know, how well did you sleep? How fatigued are you feeling? Do some ankle range of motion, stuff like that. It's a little bit like that. You have to gauge things a little bit. So, you know, from a safe perspective, I can't answer it.
Yeah.
I'm skirting around it because I don't want to put my neck on the line. No, but it depends. You know, if you've got someone who's really well conditioned, hasn't played much rugby in a season, you know, actually they could probably do quite a lot. Whereas if you've got someone who's, you know, a bit fatigued, they've played every single weekend 80 minutes for the last 3 or 4 weeks, you probably want to manage them a little bit more. You know, they could still do the movements, they could still do some of the stuff, but it's about understanding if you overload it too much, the nervous system as well as the muscular system is going to be a bit on edge, and that's when injuries occur. It's that last 20 minutes when you're fatigued, you know, and if you're pushing people too hard, then that can have consequences.
And are there any signs, like if you're just say if you're a player, are there any signs that the body's telling you, okay, you need to slow it down, maybe stop scrum training then and there?
Don't know about scrummaging particularly. I mean, pain's a really good one. Pain. Pain does not equate to damage. So we've got this idea in our head that if you're in pain, there's damage. It's not. It's not that simple. You know, there's lots of different reasons we feel pain. Um, so osteopathy treats all sorts of pain basically, and we're trying. You know, you're trying to diagnose and help people get the appropriate help. So from a rugby training perspective, pain does not mean there's damage going on, but it can help inform you. So pain is a good indicator. You know, if we're looking at overall training, your heart rate's quite a good indicator. If your heart rate's sitting a little bit higher than it normally does, your body's having to work a little bit harder, you're quite overloaded, you know, that can indicate that you're actually on the verge of being sick, illness, stuff like that. So being aware of where your heart rate kind of is, you know, we've all done training sessions where, you know, if you're monitoring your heart rate, you're thinking, why is my heart rate that high? It shouldn't be that high. This is easy. And actually, that's an indicator to you, you know, your body's under stress. Things like that, sleep quality, how you're feeling, you know, you should be training hard, but we should also be recovering harder. So nutrition, sleep, stress reduction, fluid intake, all that stuff. If that's all key, if that's all really good, and then you're not sleeping well, or you're waking up and you're just knackered, that can show that's like typical overtraining type stuff.
If a coach has limited time with the player, what are some of the specifics they should be doing in the gym? Maybe a couple of key exercises, key drills
Sure.
to develop those players.
So from a scrummaging perspective, you know, my go-to is front squat. You know, it's that, you know, front squat's a really good one. It's tougher than back squat. You know, in that front loaded position, you're actually getting those angles that where you would be in a scrum position. You know, any squatting really is really good. And then I actually also quite like to do single leg stuff. So it's called a Bulgarian split squat, where you get your foot back up on a bench, or any lunging type stuff, because you have to be able to move your feet in a scrum. What we're looking for is that double leg extension and then a quick step to catch up. Double leg extension, quick. That's how I was always taught to scrum. 2 feet on the floor at the same time. We're not doing stepping motions, because that, you got 1 foot off. If everyone's got 1 foot off at the same time, that's 8 feet on the ground, against technically 16 feet on the ground. So double footed stuff's really important, but I do like to add in some single stuff. I get quite a lot of people to do a lot of plank work and stuff where they're moving their arms. I've got this horrific drill I got off of it was the performance coach from MMA. It was a conference over here, UK Strength and Conditioning conference in the city where I am, and you're in a scrum position. You've got a bag underneath you, so 10, 15 kilos, something like that, and you're in the scrum position. So you're on your hands and your feet, knees bent, and you're dragging the bag. Then you scuttle across, drag the bag, scuttle across, and they use that in MMA, and I've used that loads with people, and it is like they get into it and think, oh, this is easy, and then after about 2 reps, they're like, what in God's earth is this? And it's horrific. I quite like using that stuff. I quite like building a bit of intensity. So, I've stopped playing rugby, and I've always had an interest in CrossFit, so I've gone into a bit of that, and some sort of, I suppose it's termed functional fitness, so a combination of weightlifting as well as body weight calisthenics type stuff. Not that I'm particularly good at any muscle ups or anything like that. I'm too heavy, but the weight stuff I still enjoy, and I like to do it with a bit of intensity. So, I should have said earlier, when you asked me about the 18-year-old thing, I've just suddenly thought, teaching people to do Olympic weightlifting is quite time consuming. So if you've got to that stage and you're not doing some of those movements, I think breaking them down and trying to learn, but not putting too much effort into it, is quite a good thing. So what I mean by that is it's quite skillful to do those movements. So if you haven't got it by then, I wouldn't focus too much on it. There's loads of other things you can do with dumbbells where you're mimicking the movements, but you're not, and getting that intensity and that stimulation. There's an interesting thing over here. One of the lads I train, some of the rugby clubs here, it's a numbers game. They're sort of including loads of these 13 to 16-year-olds in their academies over here, like 150 kids. And they are focusing on the fast children, anyone who's fast, because what they're saying now is you can't teach speed. So if you're fast, we can teach you to be skillful, but we can't teach you to be fast. So actually, that's what they're doing, which is quite interesting. It's a bit ruthless, a bit cutthroat. There's something to be said for a bit of plyometrics work, but again, maybe that's part of the sort of sport in schools over here. We're playing less and less. It's more focused on academia rather than the actual activity side of things. So, but yeah, you can have some fun in the gym as well. It doesn't all have to be like bump and grind. It can be interesting and fun. I've just done a horrific session this morning. We were doing split jerks and box jumps, and it was horrible, but it was really good. And then the other week I was doing it was 3 rep max squats with a pause at the bottom. So again, back to my rugby stuff, with V sit-ups and then a 500-meter row, an AMRAP in 20 minutes. That was terrible, but it gets that intensity. So I like to mix it up with a bit of strength stuff as well as a bit of like the intense sort of HIIT training type things, because I think it stimulates your body, keeps your brain ticking over, all that sort of stuff. So I'm still training quite hard. I think I'm probably fitter now than I hope not.
Hey, you're looking good. Have you ever tried applying any sort of gamification to the weight room?
So in warm-ups, yes. So done some stuff like press up position type, knocking your hand out, knee tap type stuff, things like that. I haven't tried it in rugby actually. I quite like when I used to do the like strength and conditioning stuff, and we do pre-season. I'd put loads of games in there. So we do when I moved over here and I became conditioning coach of the club I was at. First thing I got everyone to do was crawl the length of the field, and I still get messages to this day going, "That's still the worst thing we've ever done." belly on the floor, crawling along, and like loads of them, like, why are we doing this? And then they get to halfway and they're like, oh, this is just terrible. And I made the boys in Samboy do it on the beach in the sand, and that was even worse. So I use that, and that's like obviously getting people to try and win. So I would do running drills, like high intensity running drills. You do 300 meters with a 100-meter walk, and then you go into a game. It'd be like out of line touch, stuff like that. So you're getting that conditioning, bit of hands on the ball, and you'd make it about 10 minutes of each, so that you wouldn't have enough time to get bored. But you'd have some elements of game in there, but not in the gym. Actually, it's a good point. I'm trying to think. What was it?
You could put certain like levels of, you can create competition, and then if they can do this, then they get to move up to this level and try
Yeah,
this. And
done some things where you like it was a reward based thing. So if you hit your markers, so it was like our deadlift standard was 2.5 times body weight. Our squat standard was 2 times body weight, and bench was 1.5 times body weight. They were sort of the vague markers we were aiming for. They're quite full on though, so not many people got there. But you'd end up with a like a. I remember there was a T-shirt once we did in the gym as well. Like you got to wear the T-shirt, but it became a bit horrible because no one would wash it. It was less of uh, a treat, less of a win, is more of a bit of a booby prize.
and and following on for I see quite often line out lifters, not so much in, like, take the UK, most rugby players are in the gym, but a lot of other countries, as soon as they come out of school, they actually don't have the strength to be able to lift a 120k lock who's jumping in the line out. Is there what's the best way to train to be able to be effective as a lifter in the line out?
So I mean, the jumper's got to jump, right? Lose a bit of weight, jump a bit higher. No, there's a combination. I remember doing some stuff like, you get some people who are more athletic, but they are big, and you get some people who are, um, they're big and they're a bit lumpy and they're a bit slow. I think they're called, what was it? 5.5, they call it over here. So if you're a second row, but you're kind of a six, you're not kind of a full on, and you're a bit big, they call you like 5.5. I've heard someone use that phrase the other day. You just got to drill it. There are definitely certain things with hand positions. So, I prefer when I lifted to have my hands around the side rather than the front. So you'd actually be cupping the knee to then get it. The lifting blocks are quite a good thing. But you just got to rep it. You've got to get used to it. A lot of that stuff's about timing as well. So when they're jumping, if you can make contact with them at the right time as they're on the way up, then it's a much easier lift. If you're making contact as they're stopping in the air, you've then got to get over that inertia to get up, and that's a lot harder. So that stuff, like the timing side of it and drilling it and getting used to it, is really good. It also helps if they can keep their knees relatively close together, not kick their legs out. So again, those second rows have to have quite strong core stability to then be able to reach for the ball, or so that there's quite a lot of facets to that. You've got to practice it. You've got to have relatively good grip strength. I think a particular movement like a push press, push jerk, or a split jerk, or something like a thruster where you're squatting and then up would be really good. But there's so much timing to that stuff as well. You've got to practice. It's like the old thing where you rock up to training and everyone stood there passing the ball around, or you get props kicking to the posts. They could probably be using their time a bit better, couldn't they? We've all done it, but you could probably be actually doing some lifting practice for second rows, props, all that sort of stuff.
And with the lifting, it's technique wise. Like, I like to get my lifters quite low, basically bum to ground, so that most of that first initial movement's leg. How important is that? Do you think you need that strength and depth, or can you get away with just having such a strong core and upper body that you can just come in, hips are a bit higher, and just use basically pure upper body strength to get that player up? Do you have a preference either or?
Yeah, so I wouldn't go too deep if I was, so the way muscles and tendons work is there's a stretch reflex response. So, like if you, for example, if you were to squat down as deep as you can, hold that position, and then jump as high as you can, you're gonna score less than if you stepped into it and jumped. So it's that stretch reflex. So I think having a little bit of a halfway house so that they can bounce down to come up is a good idea. It's the balance between not having a tick and getting the movement. I think because we used to talk about this all the time. If you've got too big a tick beforehand, people can work out what you're doing, and they're looking for your movement. If you've got like in the line out, if you're trying to move as well, I think it's really important to allow that person to be able to move. If they're in that squat position, they then got to come out of there to then move. That's all considerations, but it just depends. If it's a straight up and down, you know, getting that strength, getting your legs, your big muscle groups to do more of the movement than your arms is really important. But there is an overall strength thing. If you've got like, quads of Chris Hoy, one of those bicyclists, cyclists, and they're massive, but you've got little weedy T-Rex arms, you're not really going to be that useful. So there is definitely a bit of balance to be had. And then it's also about speed. So, you know, strength on speed is power. You've got to be really powerful, trying to make sure that that movement is quick and stable. It's all very well throwing someone up there, but if you can't hold them, and if they're trying to reach a little bit for the ball and you're kind of wobbly underneath, that's what's really important. There's so many facets to that stuff. So important.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, this is more of a personal question, is you, I saw, I don't know you did this, but I'm just trying to find what country it was. Was it Bulgaria? Hungary?
Hungary, yeah, I
Hungary.
coached in Hungary for a bit, yeah.
Yeah, what was that story? I was,
That's cool. So it's really weird, actually, really random. I went to my local rugby club, Milton Keynes, because my old school team was going to play a game. So I was signed up to play a sevens tournament for the old boys team, and they cancelled. I rocked up to the tournament anyway because it's on the doorstep. And then I caught up with a mate of mine, Richie Williams, who I've known for a long time. And we were just chatting about something. And Hungary had come to Milton Keynes. They were playing in the tournament as a sevens team. And I said, look, I'm a bit of a loose end. If you need a number, I'm happy to step in. I said, I presume it's not capped. And he said, yeah, it's not capped. So technically, I've played for Hungary as well. So I ended up playing for them. And then I invited them back to my house, just the other side of the woods, for a couple of beers. And they sat in my garden. And then the manager said, oh, would you be interested in coming and doing a bit of coaching? And so we had my son in June 2018. Then I started my degree in September 2018. And then for my first 2 months of my degree, I was in Hungary one weekend, studying another weekend, Hungary one weekend, studying. It's pretty full on. And then for the next 2 years, I did about 4 or 5 trips across to Hungary. I was doing forward stuff with them. So I was coaching my mate. It was like overall development. So we didn't just coach them, we coached in schools and we did lots of age group stuff. It was really interesting. Hungary's a great country, really interesting place to go. It's like a really nice sort of second tier rugby nation, and they're really keen. So again, we used to use loads of judo, handball, all that sort of stuff. We'd poach a load of their players because rugby's not big over there, but they have good potential. So I did that, and then like most of Europe, when COVID struck, it kind of cut it all off. And they've progressed into another direction. So my last tournament with them was a sevens tournament in Colomiers in Toulouse. We were invited for the Olympic qualification tournament. So it was the top 10 nations sevens in Europe, plus the one in the tier below that, plus the top team in the tier below that, which was Hungary. First up was France in the sevens. It's a bit of a steep learning curve, but it was a great experience. It was really good fun. So we've played Lithuania, Sweden, that sevens tournament, Latvia. It's quite a cool competition, actually. Some massive men. Wow, really, really big men. So it's been really good. It's been really interesting. But I'm not doing anything at the moment with them. But it's good. It's good fun.
yeah, you doing any specific rugby coaching at the moment?
I'm not at the moment. Well, actually, no, I am. Yeah, sorry. I'm the Milton Keynes under sevens coach.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
My son's group, which is interesting. It's good fun actually. I've had to reframe things though because I'm used to coaching men who want to be there or selections and stuff like that, and now I'm coaching a bunch of 6-year-olds.
How have you found that difference from, because this is obviously a problem that clubs have, is that a lot of the youth coaches are just ex-players that come into coaching. What are some tips you could give coaches of those younger groups just to speed up that process and help the players?
Like the gamification thing you talked about earlier, like, it's a bunch of 6-year-olds who aren't, they've got no position. Oh, sorry, this is my own experience from my under sevens. A bunch of 6-year-olds that aren't in, there's no positions. It's just about general skill development, and just gamifying it, just making it interesting. Some days they're going to be less interested than others, and that's just the reality. That's like us, though, isn't it? Some days you want to work, some days you don't, you know, and flexing to that and not worrying. I kind of entered it thinking, right, I'm going to make a big difference, blah, blah, blah. And I've just had to reframe it a little bit because I'm actually like, they're only 6. They're not playing international rugby. It's not their job, and I've had to reframe my coaching, which has been quite interesting. Um, it's been good actually, though. It's, and there's some different characters. And what I found really fascinating is we went from, obviously last year we didn't play any games. It was just training. Um, and then this year we started playing games, and some of the kids have done really well in the games, really come out of their shells. And some who've done really well in the training haven't done as well, but they're all kind of on that journey of development, and it's been quite fascinating. It's quite challenging coaching your own son because he thinks it's hilarious to not do as he's asked, but I'm learning as well.
And have you found any little games or drills that are really good to get them going?
Yeah, we play and we do it all the time. It's called Hungry Hippos. Basically, you have 4 cones, balls in the middle, I don't know, 30 balls, and they've got teams on each cone, and you have to go and get a ball. Only one person allowed to go and get a ball at a time. You come back, and then as soon as all the balls have gone, you go, right, just shout, rob the nest, and then they have to rob everyone else's. And it's just absolute carnage and chaos, but they absolutely love it. That and Bulldog, standard. Everyone loves that,
Bulldog.
I think. British Bulldog, like you've got, it's like one in the middle, and they have to tackle it, and you have to run past them and tackle. So you got, like, think of like, 20. If you go between the 22 and the 5, maybe 15 meters wide, you got to get from one end to the other without getting touched, tackled,
Uh,
tagged, whatever you want to call it.
and
It's
then
tag
we
rugby now.
we call it bull rush. And,
Yeah,
and,
same.
and then
Yeah,
once you tackle them, then they stay in the middle too,
yeah,
and now it's two
yeah.
against everyone. Yeah.
They absolutely love that. And my son does jiu-jitsu as well, and they play the same thing, the same games. It's really hilarious because rugby's just a bit, it's just slightly different. It's only the wrestling side of the rugby bit. So yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Do you think that parents should push their kids into some sort of martial arts for their development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, I've obviously I retired because of concussion. I was a bit worried about the effects of that, so I've sort of gone full into CrossFit, and then I studied with someone who was a jiu-jitsu black belt, judo black belt, and we became really good friends. And she was like, "Come and try it, come and try it," and it's been brilliant. It's so hard. It's learning a whole new skill. I get absolutely my ass handed to me most weeks, but it's really good. It's really interesting. So it's a really good skill, and it's quite humbling. Like I rock up there, and there's someone who's really small, and I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna 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 do well this week, and they just tie me up into a pretzel, and I'm like, how the hell did that happen? And I think it's really good for them to realise, especially kids. My son certainly has gone from being the kid who was really angry at losing to actually understanding you have to learn to lose to win. You learn from your mistakes, you learn from those losses to progress. And I think from a confidence perspective, learning some of those martial arts, it teaches you confidence, discipline. It's another voice to listen to. I think it's brilliant. What I like about jiu-jitsu as well is it's one of the only martial arts that you can actually train as hard as you would fight. So like the other ones, you're trying not to maybe, this is my limited understanding of it, you're trying not to hit heads because you don't want to concuss people. But with jiu-jitsu, you can go full on, and and you still look after the person you're wrestling, but you can really make, try quite hard with it. So it is good.